Good afternoon. My name is Michelle, and I will be moderating today's panel for the Government of Alberta's FASD Cross-Ministry Committee. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's FASD webcast, part of a monthly series of webcasts on issues relating to fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. This webcast is part of FASD Cross-Ministry Committee's initiative and 10-year FASD strategy to provide accessible educational sessions that cover a broad range of topics that are accessible to all Albertans. For more information about this series, you can check your email for our regular updates, or you can go to hslearningseries.ca. You can also follow us on Twitter at AB Human Services. We have an exciting discussion lined up today where we hope to address some of the major questions we have heard over the last year around persons with FASD and the difficult transition to adulthood and adult care. To help us dive into these topics, we've brought in 3 panelists representing a broad spectrum of services and supports, as well as a person with FASD who has experienced the transition process. With the help of our panelists, we are going to take time to explore topics like what the transition is like and the shift to adult services looks like, as well as some of the resources and supports that are available to people making this difficult transition. As always, you'll be able to pose your questions to our panelists via our live chat, which is just below your video window. We will address as many of these questions as we can during the question and answer period at the end of this panel. Let's start off today's session with some introductions. Lisa Murphy is the Program Manager at the Lakeland Centre for FASD, overseeing diagnostic, outreach, and PCAP services. Her work has included advocating and coordinating services for children, complex youth, and adults diagnosed with FASD and their families. Wanda Beland is the Executive Director of the Northwest Region FASD Society. She is a valued member of the Family Advisory Committee who adds her experience as an adoptive parent of 4 adolescents and adults with FASD. And Angel Aspin is an active member of the Alberta Family Advisory Council as a consultant, as well as a respite worker for a foster family of 5 affected by FASD. She also lives with FASD and brings us her personal experience. And Paige is our online moderator. She'll pose your web chat questions to our guests today. And today's session is also being recorded, and the video will be posted on the Alberta FASD website following the video. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you, ladies, for coming in today and taking the time to share your experience. Lisa, I want to start to talk with you about the transition to adulthood and what that has meant for you working at Lakeland.
So the transition to adulthood, the expectations in adulthood in general are very challenging. When we turn 18, society says that we're now adults and it's time to grow up and get out there, move out. So there is quite a bit of an expectation that we can just do this. This is a time where people in general just have to know what they want to do. And people with FASD, sometimes they don't. So it's been really important with our work to try and help that process along.
And what are the specific challenges with that transition?
Well, one of the major things is that the services that are available are pretty few and far between. When we look at adulthood, people that have high needs, there's services out there available for them. We call them adult services. And not everybody fits the criteria for that. When you look at FASD, it's a spectrum disorder. It's people have different challenges and different things that they're really good at. And so not everybody is going to meet those criteria, or nor will they need all of the services that are available.
Wanda, I want to talk to you about this as well. So you've worked in this area for quite some time. What does the transition to adulthood, what has that meant to the people you've worked in, the services that you provide for FASD?
As a parent of 4 individuals who are prenatally exposed, for the first two oldest, the transition, we went through kicking and screaming and resisting that transition, all three of us, because we did not have the supports in any of the agencies we went to. It was a few years ago, and the agencies did not have the FASD knowledge to support us through it. So it was a really traumatic time, and it continues to impact them as they continue on through their adulthood at this point. They're young adults, and it's been a difficult time for them to transition in the way that we would recognize, like Lisa said, transitions. What are normal transitions, and what does it look like? For our youngest two, it was a bit easier because by that time we recognized that transitioning meant from the time they were little all the way up. So there are transition periods throughout all periods in their life, and we provided the support in a different way for them, learning from the oldest that we had. As for our agency, the transitions, because we've been growing with our clients, we change our methods and our programming as the individuals grow. So they teach us where the transitions need to be. It's been a learning experience for our agency, but we believe we're putting in the supports as they require them. So the transitions are becoming much smoother. And we've also had the opportunity to inform many of the agencies as we bring our clients in for services where they are becoming much more FASD informed and able to support them in the way they need to be supported.
How important would you say this period of time is for your clients?
Well, when we're looking at the transition period, we're looking at teenagers into adulthood. Every transition period is important for them. And this time period, what we're finding, and we developed a program specifically for this time period in the last year, because we find that the individuals between the ages of 16 and 22 need much more intense support. It's a difficult time for them. A lot of times the natural supports back away, or the services they've been accessing up to that point are no longer available to them. And we provide much more intense support for them. So there is a higher need, I think, for supports within this time period that there is no program out there that identifies to help ease the way from one level of supports needed to another, I guess.
Angel, I want to welcome you to this panel and thank you very much for sharing your story, because you have FASD, so you can really give us some personal insight. Tell us a little bit first about your background.
Well, I'm 31 years of age. I am impacted by fetal alcohol syndrome, as you've shared here. It's been a journey, without a doubt. I have just a deep passion and a drive to make a difference, and that's what brought me here in the first place, is reaching out into the community to see where I can make a difference with a lot of frustration that's built up and added up while hitting barriers and walls. And here I am, because I just have a drive to make a difference, to be able to make it easier for the next ones going through the door.
What was the transition to adulthood like for you?
It was terrible. It was hitting one barrier after another, but you got to think when you hit a barrier and you feel defeated or you give up, you got to intensify that, because everything is intensified. I find with having the fetal alcohol syndrome, you're very oversensitive with things. So that's a big part of it.
Were there any other challenges that you can remember?
I find just the process of the paperwork, like stepping in the door anywhere, to get the transition from just being that youth into the adulthood. You look and really it feels like you're starting as a child beginning life, because you don't know which doors to go through, and all the supports that you were entitled to before are now gone. Everything gets cut off, and then, as you said also, right, it all comes down to, well, it's time to grow up, it's time to get out, you're 18, it's time to be an adult. But then I think, and if you take into consideration, it is knowing that people with fetal alcohol syndrome, the mentality is cutting the age in half. So throwing someone out there at 18, really, it's not like throwing somebody out there that's 18 saying, find your way. Basically, it's like having an empty toolbox and saying, be on your way and go fix everything you need to fix. Right? So, yeah, it's definitely been difficult.
I imagine quite overwhelming.
Very overwhelming. It definitely causes much anxiety. Anxiety has been a big struggle for me. Depression. It's on and off. I find that, if anything, I've had to plug into my own support system, just because I feel like the system that's around, it's almost like setting you up for failure.
Why do you say that?
I say because the supports that are in place, there's been a few agencies that I've been connected within that's supposed to be there to help you, help anybody with disabilities. And it's the process of everything. It's more of a fight to get, you know, if it's whether it's the paperwork process, it's the funding, it's the requirements. I guess I've been known as high functioning on the spectrum because it's a spectrum. So it's almost like you get cut off to what you're entitled to because there's nothing in the middle. It's either you're going to have that support or you're not. Either you can function on your own and you need the support or you don't. I feel like there's no in between.
And when you say you turn to your own support network, what do you mean by that?
I've built myself a support network within the church. I started attending a church, fighting with depression, being separated from family. So I started building my own family within the church, and they've been a tremendous support for me. So, yeah.
Can you talk about a moment that was successful in that transition period? Obviously, finding the church was a positive.
Absolutely, that was huge for me. During the transition of it, I guess, was pretty hard. You got to think, I guess, we struggle with such anxiety, and well, for myself, it's a wide spectrum, so it affects everybody differently, obviously. But for me, it's the anxiety that impacts me, and so going out and reaching out for those supports was huge for me. It's almost crippling, where there was a number of years where I wasn't getting out and getting engaged, and I was losing job after job, and I felt absolutely lost until I connected in with the church and built that support system.
Being able to talk to people, lean on them.
I think it's the big part of having the external brain because you have that impulse. And for me, I learned a lot of the hard ways, learning through my consequences, of course. But in the end of it, I find that overall, I've become a success with how far I've come. But there's no way I'd be where I am today without my support system.
I want to talk about, in general, making the transition for people with FASD. So Lisa, can you give me an understanding, help us just understand a little bit better what happens in that transition period? We know what happens for typical people, but what's happening for people with FASD? How's it different?
Well, I think we need to remember that transition is different for everybody, whether or not they have a diagnosis of FASD. I mean, when we move from adolescence into adulthood, as I said before, there's kind of this societal expectation that we're just going to make that transition. And we forget about all the little steps that it takes to do that and what it actually means. So with many of the people that I've worked with, and as Angel had said as well, like it really depends on what their needs are. So we've worked with some people that when we're looking at transition to adulthood, well, they're going to need services such as persons with developmental disabilities and accessing quite a range of government services. But not everybody fits there. Sometimes transition is moving into post-secondary school. We've worked with some clients who will go, and they just need a little more support on how to access extra support in those classrooms, or maybe even how to do the application process. Others might need support trying to decide what they want to do. If they want to work, is it paid, is it voluntary? So really, it's very individualistic. When we say again that transition it is so challenging because a lot of the times we don't know what we want. And really that goes right across the board. I can't say that I knew what I wanted to do at 18 for the rest of my life, but we still have that expectation. Many of the people that I've worked with, they have a hard time expressing or even knowing what it is they want because maybe they don't know what they're good at. So transition really means being there to help find some of those positive things, those successes.
Wanda, we talk about the transition of care. Can you explain a little bit about what's happening there at this age?
For us, because we do all of the FASD programming in the region, the transition of care is cradle to grave. So we begin working with individuals when they are born, if we are aware that they have been prenatally exposed to alcohol, and they never exit our programs at this point. We've only been around for 8 years, but the plan is for them not to exit because they will continue to need that support. But for the transition of care, even with the individuals on a day-to-day basis, if we have to prepare someone for a transition, let's say they're going to be applying for employment, that we don't only prepare the individual, we prepare the caregivers and the natural supports, because there's a process in place in order for them to be successful to maintain employment. We need to have the natural supports in place as well, because there's going to be different types of supports that they're going to have to provide throughout the transition, and employment itself transitions, you know, the level of support they're going to need. So the transition of care varies again with each individual, but again, for us, it's important that everyone who's involved in the individual's life is aware that there's something new going on, and this is the type of the support that they're going to need. And it's not by chronological age, it is by need that we look at the transition. So we can't say from youth to adulthood. It is just part of the life needs of the individual who have been prenatally exposed.
Angel, tell us from your experience, what is it specifically that you remember about making that transition to adulthood?
Well, as I reflect back and I think what made it successful for the transition would definitely be I look at the world around us and I think that people in whatever career field that they pick to be in, and I think that to be in a field working with people with disabilities takes much patience. I reflect back on my own experiences and taken the hard paths of learning the hard way, just out of impulse and what comes with a disability. And it brings me back to, you can have all the knowledge and you can have everything that you can get taught in school and offer that forward, but if you're lacking the compassion and building that trust between you and your client or whoever it is that you're working with that is impacted, it's not going to go anywhere. Like for myself personally, what made it grow and things to move forward in my life is building those trust and relationships, which absolutely did not come easy. It was time after time that they continued to come back to me when I took my flight response because of just being overwhelmed or not having those supports before, so it all feeling like it's almost new. So, yeah.
I want to shift the discussion now to the types of services that are available to help with the transition. So Wanda, why don't I start with you and just tell me a little bit about what's available out there?
Out there is in the Mackenzie region up in northern Alberta. And again, because we do our own programming, we have 3 programs, I guess, that we would transition through. The first one is called the FASD Youth Coach Program. It's from 0 to 15. And did we plan on this being a transition program? No, it's a need that we developed as we worked through the program. And individuals in the Youth Coach Program are supported to learn advocacy skills, social skills, and to do a lot of physical activity. what we found out is that the individuals who were in a youth coach program, as they aged into 16 to 22 years of age, they were requiring much more support than we were able to give with our youth coach program. So what we did is, in 2016, we developed what we now call, for lack of a better term, the FASD Youth Transition Coach Program. And within that program, we're hoping to be able to match up individuals who will need that extra support in this journey, in this time period in their lives, to ensure that they are supported to access social skills, to learn better advocacy skills as well, whether they want employment, to continue with their education. Because of their age, certain doors close at 18, so we want to ensure that doesn't happen. And this is also to support the caregivers, so that there is that extra person during this sometimes very difficult 16 to 22 year age range, where there's a lot of other things going on, that they need that extra person, that extra support there to help guide the youth, whether it's in employment or education, that they have someone that they can call and request supports from, as whether it's difficult or not, but to help them with the transition. How do I do this? Who do I talk to? Sometimes that's not very obvious out there, and we're able to be the conduit through which the caregivers and the individuals can go to get supports. And also to help inform agencies, what do the supports look like in this time period during their lives, so that we can guide them in supporting the individuals. And then once they get to 22 years of age, we have what's called the FASD Life Coach Program. And that will remain with them for as long as they need it, to continue to support them depending on what transition they need at that point.
So they're not left hanging.
Yes.
Lisa, what do you offer at your organization for the transition to adulthood?
So at the Lakeland Center, much like Wanda's network, we support individuals from birth across the lifespan. We started off with what we call the follow-up support, and that's working with families and with children diagnosed with FASD. And we also support adults who have been diagnosed as adults. And so in the beginning, we thought we offered this program to advocate for our clients, to ensure that they had support and understanding about their diagnosis. And as time went on, we started to really notice that there was this gap between the children and adult services. Much like outside of the FASD world, there's all these services for kids and then for adults, but nothing in between. And so in 2009, we developed our own transition program. And so what this looks like is we work with youth starting as early as age 15, and it's quite intense, for lack of better words. We work one-on-one with the youth, and then as well as their support network. What we're doing is basically creating a plan. So looking at what their goals are, and then making a step-by-step guide on how to do that. It is a living document, so we do work with the individual and their families or supports for as long as it takes to create this plan, but it's something that's reviewed as time goes on. The youth also develop their own project, and it's something that's meaningful to them, that then they can, it kind of helps them to remember about their goals and what they're hoping to achieve.
Angel, what do you think is lacking? What would you have liked to have seen?
I think the big lacking area was the knowledge within these agencies of the actual workers that work with us. Just their knowledge with the fetal alcohol syndrome and how to meet our needs. I found it was a lot of repetitiveness, repeating my disability over and over so that my needs could be met. But in the meantime, I think it just came down to lack of communication and lack of knowledge. But in the meantime, it's at the cost of my time, and each time you get more and more discouraged. And that's where my concern comes in, because when you have that discouragement that keeps coming in, that's when you give up, or you take flight, or you don't push forward for the more. And there's so much potential if you keep pushing and you have those supports. I think there could be just a drastic change worldwide.
Do you think there needs to be more education done on FASD?
Absolutely, I do. I think that's the biggest key factor that there is. If you can know how to meet the basic needs, then all the rest falls into place.
What other kind of services are available around the province? Wanda, why don't you start with that?
Well, each network, there's 12 networks in the province, plus, and each network has their own different types of services that they provide for the individuals. The networks have been allowed to respond to the local needs, whatever their region's needs are. And so I think there's many networks in the province that have similar programs, but they're not named the same. So you couldn't transfer from our area and go to Edmonton and receive the FASD Youth Transition Coach program, right? It would be a different program. So each network is providing the services according to their needs within their region.
And from what you're saying, I think that's really important, isn't it? That they're focusing in on each individual need as opposed to having kind of a blanket formula for everyone. Would you agree?
I agree. What the services look like within each community. For example, being in a remote area, our services are going to look very different because we know everybody's aunt, uncle, and cousin, so we know how to provide their services and where their supports are, whereas in our urban area, that's not going to be necessarily something that the individuals are going to be aware of or know.
Lisa, what else is available that you're aware of?
Well, there are different programs or different transition options out there, but they're not specific to FASD. Children's Services has their own transitioning children out of care, but really when you look at FASD, it's few and far between. I think it's really important to note that the way that the systems are set up we have an expectation that whoever it is that's transitioning has people backing them up to help them through that process, and that doesn't always happen.
What about in rural parts of Alberta? What do you recommend to people who are suffering with FASD?
Reach out to your network coordinator. They will know what's available within those regions, and it's easy to find. It's on the Alberta government website, and each of the coordinators are listed there, and they would have the information as to where the services will be and who you would access. And it also would be very important for the individuals who are looking for services to inform the network coordinators, oh, by the way, there's a gap here, we need this, because this is where we're getting our information from, is from the individuals who have this need, and it helps inform our practice better.
Because it's not something necessarily that you can predict, right, where it's going to crop up. So it is important that people talk about it and get the word out, right?
The other agencies and service providers that are around, including schools, can do something too. If they have children or youth that are in that age bracket, there's no harm in starting a transition plan right from that place. With what I've seen with many of my clients, some of it is just they're not even aware of the supports that they actually have or could have. So if you look at within the school itself, there's teachers and support people all the time, and a lot of them that really want to help our kids move forward. So that transition can start anywhere.
So how do you get that to happen more often then? How can you improve that situation?
As Angel said, training, lots of training.
Yeah. A lot of communication.
Yeah.
The agencies and the individuals have to communicate. There has to be that support system around each individual.
So what's being done to improve that?
In our areas, we collaborate and partner with any agencies that our clients and individuals are involved with. It's that constant communication.
Is that happening for you too,
Yes.
Lisa?
Yeah, all the programs within Lakeland that Lakeland offers, that is a huge push is collaborating with the other services. And that's definitely how we need to do it. If we need to move past working in silos, because I think that that's what's making many of our folks trying to, how are you supposed to navigate the system if you're the only person doing it?
Angel, I want to talk specifically about ways to improve. And I know you did kind of generally talk about it, but what do you think are some ways that you could improve the services that you'd like to see done right away?
I think some flexibility. I think that's absolutely key. As I think of the transition, even to, like I was talking about earlier, getting set up to go into a program, I find that it's almost a challenge in itself, already taking that step to go there. But I guess when you walk through the door, how are you gonna have your needs met without, like, how are they gonna meet your needs with them coming to you? Like, for me personally, I don't know where to reach out. Like when I started with the programs and started reaching out to school, I don't know what resources to go to or where to even begin to get the help, like in regards to a tutor and stuff like that. Like, how are they going to meet our needs?
Wanda, how do you think that can be improved? You talk about communicating and working as a team, but
I think the FASD service networks have to be more visible in some way so that someone who has a diagnosis or suspected of a diagnosis knows who to contact and have the information to be easily accessible to them. Because everyone, we've had in the past in our area where people didn't know where to go, and now we have our society, which is known in the region, so people know if there is an issue to call there. But I know in many centers that's not available because it's not necessarily a disconnect, it's just the knowledge of the FASD service networks being there might not be as well known as we want to think it is. And it needs to be. We need to identify the services for individuals with FASD as services for individuals with FASD rather than trying to, name it something else, so it'll be easier to find that pathway.
what do you suggest should happen, Lisa?
I agree with both Angel and Wanda. Accessing your local FASD network is probably the key at this point. Not every network across the province runs differently. The Lakeland area and Mackenzie area, many of the programs come right from the network, whereas some of the other centers are not. It's other agencies that are contracted to do some of the work. But by contacting the network, you're able to find out who to go to next or how to navigate that system in itself.
How do you encourage more people to go and seek out help?
Being a voice. I think going out for the people that are success stories it all comes back to the support system, right? And when you see success, you need to acknowledge it because it's a huge thing for people impacted with fetal alcohol syndrome. I find it's an up and down every day, it's minute to minute. More you encourage it and acknowledge what is being an accomplishment rather than acknowledging, where there's a gap or where maybe they're not excelling as much would be the difference. I find more of the positive approach base would be key.
Obviously, you've got your own experience, but you know other people with FASD.
Yeah.
How has it been different for them transitioning to adulthood?
I think the big difference with the people that I know impacted is a lot of them were diagnosed as a kid. So they knew earlier in life. I didn't know until I was an adult. And once I got my diagnosis, I basically got a piece of paper with a diagnosis saying, you're impacted by it, and that was it. I had no idea where to reach out, what this meant for me. I always knew that I struggled, but I didn't know, I was clueless. Without the direction and the support, I didn't even know where to start. So it's, yeah, there's a lot to weigh out.
Well, it obviously is a lot better if it's an earlier diagnosis. Wanda, how can we improve that kind of situation where we get earlier diagnosis and then they're given the proper information and direction as to what to do next?
Was for the networks to be funded, or the hospitals or clinics to be funded, so that we can ensure that the wait lists do not go so long that somebody who goes on the wait list when they're 5 doesn't get diagnosed till they're 15. We want to ensure that people are getting timely diagnosis in the way, in a time where they could best be supported as well. The earlier the better, we know that.
Is it really that long, like where you could be on the wait list? Or was that an exaggeration? Or?
It depends. But once we start getting, once people are more aware of the clinics being out there and this the diagnosis, our lists are going to continue to grow. They're still growing. We've been working on it for a number of years, and our wait lists are definitely longer now than when we started. And because it's a new, not a new, fairly new diagnosis that we're doing, and people are just learning about it, the wait lists are going to get longer before they get shorter, because people are starting to identify. For example, if Angel had known earlier what types of supports were there, but the knowledge just wasn't there. And now that there is more knowledge around the importance of early diagnosis, the importance of the type of diagnosis that is needed, and the complexity of this disability, there will be more people seeking supports and diagnosis. So we need to continue to ensure that the clinics operate and provide that information and then direction as to how to get supports.
I'd like to add that I think it is very critical to catch it at that young age, because for myself personally, being one that was impacted by it and not finding out to that later age due to being raised in a family that has addictions, right? That's where it stems from in the first place. But if it was caught at the beginning, I probably wouldn't have dealt with so many consequences and learning the hard way and ended up in the system as I did, with the law and probation and all the conditions that follows with it, which is why, again, it's so key to get it right at the beginning, to have that support system in place.
And the difference, like even with my own children, the difference between the diagnosis of my youngest, who was diagnosed when he was just over 2 years old, as compared to the oldest, who was diagnosed when he was 16, the knowledge that we would have had and the ability to transition appropriately through all of those phases would have made his adult life much smoother, I would say. I mean, he learns the lessons, but it's definitely delayed.
Well, you're definitely still in the learning phase of the whole diagnosis, it sounds like. Is that correct, Lisa?
Yeah. One of the things that I was thinking about is that we do talk about how we need to get that knowledge out there and train people on FASD, and that isn't going to change, I don't think. I think unless you're living it every moment, we forget a lot of the behaviors that come with some of the challenges, and because it's not out there, we're not talking about it as not enough, in my mind. We hang on to the stereotype with FASD. So in order to get past that, we need to keep talking about it. And that all comes together in some ways, that if you want an early diagnosis, we have to be able to talk about it. We have to be able to talk about FASD and say, yes, it's there, but there are supports and there are things that we can do to help this process. And if we don't keep talking, then we're going to be stuck.
Are you not talking, or it's not being discussed? Is it because of a stigma, or what do you see it at? What's the big obstacle in it not being talked about so much, Angel?
I feel myself it's the one disability that's missed, like just completely off the chart, right? They have everything that ties into it, like the ADHD or the OCD or the impulse, and they have all the stuff that's tied into it, but they don't want to, it's almost like they're missing to identify it as fetal alcohol syndrome. So in the meantime, it's the one thing that, like, it's almost that barrier that you can't go forward and have certain supports, because what are you labeling it as, basically?
And I guess that just comes back down to understanding, learning more about it, and sharing that information.
Absolutely.
I want to find out, Angel, about your transition to adulthood and how long it took to go through. Just help us understand a little bit more, because you do have that personal experience. I want to find out what it was like for you.
Well, I'm 31 now, and I feel like I am still in the middle of my transition. It is so often that as I'm going through things, I find that, like back to what I said earlier, I almost feel like a kid starting life with not knowing where to go, right? Growing up without direction from parents, that's how I grew up. That I almost feel like that's what I'm going through, because those supports aren't there and the acknowledgement isn't there, and so the transition was, it's a critical time. I find that's going to be the make it or break it. Basically, if the support's in place, there's all the potential for success. For an example, I'm here. This is absolutely huge for me. I've never had self-esteem or confidence, so being here doing this is big, and this is what I engage in constantly. I'm always reaching out to get in the community, to be that voice, to make the difference, because that's exactly what we need for people to hear, for people to actually take into consideration that we too are people and we have needs. It's just like anyone that has needs. We all have the needs, but at the same time, we need to actually be sensitive to what those needs are, rather than sticking it in a box and it being okay for everybody. It's the same for everybody, because it's not.
And you do really put yourself out there. I want to make mention, because I think it's really very cool what you've done. You've done something with your hair. Tell us all about, tell us about this courageous move that you made.
Well, I got to give the credit to two precious kids, actually, Lily and Wyatt, part of a ministry that I'm part of, teaching children to be disciples. The boldness to go to school every day with a shaved head as a young girl absolutely inspired me. So I had to go forward. They were supporting the hair massacre, donating for wigs for the children with cancer that can't have the hair. So I let them shave it for me. I jumped ahead and got on it. You know, that was the anxiety kicking in to why I beat it before the date, but here we are. Yeah, it's just my heart to engage with children. I think it was a big part to show them that the difference that they make, because they're the ones who inspired me, and it trailed with a number of people after I did it. I had family members that I've been disconnected with that seen that I shaved my head and jumped to also do fundraising. So it's just an incredible, just inspiring how just two kids can make all the difference, right?
And Lisa, this must be an inspirational story for you to hear this. I mean,
it's amazing. It really is. I mean, I met Angel a few months ago now. She came to one of our meetings, and just the way that she speaks, you are amazing, and I'm really happy you came.
Thank you.
Wanda, do you have other experiences and examples that you can tell of success stories of people who have, made it through that transition and things are really on the right track?
For some, those especially who have been involved in our youth coach program for a number of years, the transition has been, I'd say, easier but smoother. Where we have some who are employed, one is off post-secondary. School has become not a fight anymore for some, so it's more an interest. Their ability to advocate, even at a young age, has definitely been a highlight for some of our workers especially. And just getting through day to day sometimes is a success for many of our adults. The fact that they can reach out and they will phone if they need help, that's huge, because many will try and fix the situation. They don't want another person telling them what to do, and oftentimes it ends up in a negative circumstance. So the fact that they will call us on a daily basis is a positive as well. So we have a lot of individuals who are working very hard with their FASD coaches to ensure that they're looking forward now rather than just let's survive. They are starting to look forward, is this what I want to do, especially with our FASD transition coach. She really works closely with the individuals to ensure that there's a goal. It's not just today. We're not talking about today. There's a goal down the road, whether it's your education, whether it's your employment, whether it's your role as a parent. What is that going to look like, and how can we help you transition? How can we help you today to ensure that that continues on?
How important is it that Angel share her experiences with people?
It is important for the individuals that we work with to be able to say, sometimes it's tough. Yes, there's a struggle, but look at what Angel's done. And then look at what you can do, because we can relate what Angel's done as a positive and bring back and say, look at what you did today. That's a positive as well.
And how about to those who don't have FASD? To those that you're trying to get education out to and teach people to and help them understand what's happening?
That the individuals who have this disability are very capable and can go many places and do many things. The fact that they need support shouldn't mean that they don't have that opportunity.
And it's never too late. You don't have to, yes, it would be ideal to have a diagnosis early on and have all the supports in place and led right through, but it's not too late. You can be diagnosed later on and still be very successful.
How late have you seen diagnosis been made? And
in our agency, we've actually had adults diagnosed in their late 50s.
Wow. So how is it different for them?
Well, I'd say it's as Angel has told us already, it's that struggle and getting by, but you know what, they're still living, they're still making it, and I think that we really need to admire that and support that success that they have got to where they are.
When you talk to people about this, Angel, not in a situation like this, but you know, in other situations, how do you approach it with people?
With a lot of grace. It is asking for a lot. I'll admit, I'm coming from the end of being the one impacted, and I know that it's a lot to work side by side with me, which is why I've built such a big support system. It's almost like I have a support for every area of my life, so like for each section of my life, so that there's nothing missed, and that's been critical for me. So.
And would you say that's quite common, Lisa, that they just need a lot of support, every angle?
It depends for every person. Every person needs are different. So definitely some will need more support than others. But as I said earlier, I mean, there's even what adult services are available. Some people with FASD have high needs. Others are doing quite well with a little bit of support, so it depends.
Did you want to add something?
Yeah.
I thought so.
Okay, so that makes me think of just that this is where I find that the system is, you know, a little bit, I think there's a gap where either, like I was saying earlier, either you're high functioning or low functioning, but I find that it's almost the support's there. You have to have the support, and you have to fully lean into the system for almost having the extra support that you don't need. Does that make sense to you? In order to gain the support. And I think that the budget could be saved a whole lot if they actually acknowledged their strengths, but still allowed for you to have the funding that you needed for the little bit of support that you need to find that balance.
It's a bit of a shift,
Yes.
is what you're asking for. Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing all this information, and particularly to you, Angel. I know that's a very courageous move to come on, and you've done very well, but we're not quite done because we want to take some questions from our audience. So we're going to throw it on over to Paige now and get our first question.
All right, so our first question today is for Angel, and the question is that you mentioned your support network and trusting relationships played the biggest role in your success into adulthood. How big of a focus should relationship building be when planning for the future, at age 16, 17?
I think it would be absolutely critical. I think that's the break in age where you're starting to discover yourself, where you're discovering where you want to go next, where you become curious. But you also got to take into consideration the impulse that's there. So having those supports in place, I think, are absolutely critical to be, as much as you can get ahead of the game, I think that's what you need to do. You can never get ahead of it too soon.
Do you agree, Wanda?
I agree. I believe at that age too, it's really difficult for us to maintain as caregivers that same level of support because you start getting tired. And the caregivers need support to be able to maintain that relationship so it doesn't break down. It's important to see them through from 16 to 22 and say, yes, it does get better. After that age of exploration that we all go through, that it will get better. And if we can have the caregivers supported to stick with it, it's tough. And if we can stick with it, we do see light at the end of the tunnel. There's a lot of turns and twists, but it is critical. And we've seen that through the individuals that we work with, those individuals who continue to maintain a relationship with their caregiver have a much smoother transition into adulthood than those who don't.
Would you say the same thing, Lisa?
Definitely, yeah. The more people surrounding those who need the support, the better. We do, in some of the difficult times, it's easier to run than it is to stick with it. And I think that goes for both the individual with FASD and the family, or agencies for that matter. I mean, it's definitely easier to give up, but it isn't helpful. So the more people there and sticking it out and seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, the better.
Paige?
Great. So our next question is from someone who lives in rural Alberta, north of Peace River, and the question is about programs available outside of the larger centers. They are saying the closest support is 3 hours away, and it makes them difficult to get there on a regular basis. They have a 12-year-old that has just been diagnosed, and they're having issues with the school system. She's been excluded from groups such as 4-H, and we're wondering what education could be brought into those smaller communities to give them some additional support.
My advice would be for her to contact the Northwest FASD Service Network, which is based out of Grand Prairie, and she can find the contact information for Gwen online.
I'm sure that people do feel isolated, especially in a situation like that.
I would advise her to move to high level. That's 3 hours north of where she's at.
and you know, that's tricky to do, but what you are saying is that there is help available, so make sure to reach out. And
it's hard to reach out.
And what about this whole idea of you know, a 12-year-old not being able to go into 4-H because obviously there isn't the understanding?
Like Angel had said, education. Education is so important. Sometimes individuals in agencies will hear the term FASD and have preconceived ideas as to what the abilities are of this individual, what their strengths are, and they need to be educated. This parent needs to look at the strengths of this individual and really sell those to 4-H, to any other agency. With us, with our youth coach program, we would have sent somebody with this girl to 4-H so that there would be that extra body there, her mentor who would help her figure out the situations and to ensure that behaviors were not an issue for her.
That's a good
but
idea.
Not everybody has.
Yeah, and not everyone has that option, but that's a very good idea to suggest. All right, Paige.
Our next question is, what role does having a vision for the future play in a successful transition into adulthood?
Angel?
Can you say that one more time?
Sure. What role does having a vision for the future play in a successful transition into adulthood?
Again, I would say it's critical. It's a long journey ahead, so just be prepared for lots of change, because I find that I'll have my mind absolutely set on something. I'm like, you know, I'm going to school. I'm I'm gonna, whatever it is I'm taking or whatever I'm set on, seriously, a month later, I could be set on something completely different. So, but I think that's because I didn't have no stability or anything that was in the way, and I didn't have those supports. So if those supports and the plan is in place, you're gonna help set them up for success. But if you're gonna let them explore, they're gonna learn through error, which follows with consequences.
What do you think, Lisa? How important does it become to have that vision, perhaps even writing it down?
I think it's helpful to have something to start with. We change our minds all the time, and we can't expect that at 15, 16 that we are going to know what we're going to do with the rest of our lives, or that we're going to know how to get there. But having some sort of vision, some goal, even if it's just an idea, it helps. And you can focus then, or have something that starts giving you a pathway to get there. We've worked with some of our youth that say, oh, they're going to be veterinarians when they grow up, and maybe they will. But maybe it's not about being a veterinarian. It could just be that they really love working with animals and need another vision of what it looks like to work with animals.
It's definitely a good starting point, though.
Exactly. And so having that vision is absolutely critical. But just know that we don't have to be stuck to that.
The workers get stuck to the vision sometimes more than the person they're trying to help.
Yes.
Do they?
And that could be that's a risk.
Yes.
So how do you avoid that then?
A lot of education, a lot of supervision. Supervision is essential so that the supervisor can recognize this is actually your goal. It's no longer their goal.
Mm-hmm.
But it's to maintain that. Like if they're really interested in something when they're young, to bring it back, like as a parent, to bring them back and remind them, remember when, and they'll tell me that's no longer an option. Or as in the case of our oldest daughter, she always wanted to work with animals. Now she's taking a course to be a dog groomer. So there is that vision, but that's from when she was little, and it got lost in that stretch between 16 to 22 or 14 to 22. It totally got lost, but it's back. So that vision, I think, really grounds them as long as we don't get stuck in what we want their vision to be.
And that's pretty common with a lot of parents, isn't it? Paige?
So our next question is sort of around the long wait lists in terms of getting support, and they're wondering what we can do in term to sort of avoid, having any complications before we can sort of get them help.
Advocate to the government or whoever the funders are for the services to ensure, especially as parents, to contact your MLAs, to contact your network coordinator, to contact anybody or the powers that be to ensure that the services that you need they're being advocated for. It's important because many people don't hear about this. They don't know that the need is there, so it's important.
How have things improved over the past, let's say, 10 to 15 years?
We have our service networks. We have the FASD service networks. That has been key. Prior to 2009, everything we did in the high-level area was voluntary. And we would do bake sales to get money for clinics. We no longer have to do that. The role that the provincial government has taken on in ensuring that services are provided across the province in some way has been key to our ability to provide the level of services that we do in our area. And it's great, and I think everybody's benefiting. Do we have the data to show the differences at this point? We're getting to that point because it's just we're in our 10th year. So we will show the progress that has happened, and it's been key that the government has been on board to provide this funding to provide the services. It's just not enough.
Yeah, what do you think, Lisa? Do you agree?
Oh, definitely. The networks came to be because of the need that was there, and the government really stepped in to say, hey, yeah, there is a problem and we need to help. So that's been amazing. I think that each network evolves every day. So we have to make do with what we have, and we provide services as best as we can. And it's up to everybody out there to really push and say, yeah, we need more.
Our next question is from someone who actually works in the correctional system, and they were wondering if you could provide them with any advice for working with inmates that have FASD.
Lisa?
I can get training. We really need, training is not a one-time thing. We've actually in our network have really been starting the push of this needs to be an annual thing. There are many people in the correctional facilities that have FASD. But maybe we need to step back and take a look at why that's happening. And even within, there's things about some of the correctionals, the structure within it, that is very helpful. So, yeah, keep that in mind.
I think if the individual who's being supported by the correctional officer, find out if they have supports outside of the area. For example, with us, when we have individuals who go into the, if they're incarcerated, we try to connect with whoever's working with them, and we always ensure that they have the information from us. If there is any information they need, find out whoever's been working with them, try and have a conversation with them to figure out where's the next step. So once they're released, who are they going to be released to? What is that going to look like? And what kind of supports are they going to have in place? Especially if they already have a diagnosis. If it's suspected they have a diagnosis, then my advice to the worker within the center is to start advocating for a diagnosis of some kind.
Mm-hmm. And to add on to that, I think it's really vital that support piece or the connection. I have worked with some folks that have made their way into the correctional facilities, and it's almost like they're completely disconnected once they're there. So they do very well within the system, sure, but then once they're released, the doors are just basically opened up and see you later.
And that's another transition.
Yes, it is, absolutely. And sometimes those that I've worked with, then they're not really sure what the next step is. So we might not be the first person on their list of people to call. Whereas if we could keep that communication going while they're incarcerated, if we could have that open line, then we can work together to make sure that it's supported on the way as they're released.
Angel, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, when I think of corrections for myself, I can remember countless times, because yeah, I ended up in prison for a while there. I can remember countless times of actually getting in trouble further in the prison just because I didn't understand the instructions, right? I need that time to actually process the information, or, and I already just went, you got to think you go through this shock of transition when you're going into the prison already as it is. So, I don't know, it's like you need that support within the inside and that understanding, because if they understood the fetal alcohol syndrome, I think it would take a lot of the fighting out. A lot of the fight and the impulse, because that's what stemmed out of it all the time. It was always just fighting. That was the automatic response, because you don't know how else to express yourself, and that's the impulse that came out.
That's more education again, right?
Yep.
For the people who are
Absolutely.
working in these jails and prisons.
And I think we have to remember too that the way that the justice system is designed is that with the hope or the belief that anybody that is going through the system, that they're going to learn from their consequences, and that by going to jail means that they're going to not like that and do better next time. And yeah, it doesn't happen that way. We really need to keep that in mind, that we're going to keep seeing the same behavior if those supports are not put in place and we don't have that education out there for everybody.
Our last question today is, how can I find a program in my area?
What area are they from?
From Edmonton, but really any center in Alberta. How would I go about finding a program for me?
Network coordinator. Go online, just type in FASD network, and all of them are listed. There's a map. It shows you what network you're in. Call the contact person there, and they will guide you. Sorry, I should be looking at you.
All right, wonderful. A big thank you to our guests, Lisa, Wanda, and Angel, for generously sharing your experience and insight with us. And to all of you, thank you very much who tuned in today to our session. We're grateful you spent the hour with us, and we hope that you found the conversation informative and helpful. As we mentioned in the opening, this webcast is part of the Government of Alberta's Human Services Learning Series, which will be running around the same time each month through June of 2017. This series covers topics from fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, like the one you saw today, but also has series developed by the Employment First Initiative, the Alberta Brain Injury Initiative, and the Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee. To get updates and registration information about each of the sessions, you can email us at fasd@gov.ab.ca and ask to be added to our mailing list. As mentioned, today's webcast was recorded, and the video will be posted online along with videos from all the previous webcasts. The video link will be sent out to all registrants in the near future, and we encourage you to share this video with anyone you think may be interested. And of course, if you have any feedback about today's webcast, please email us at fasd@gov.ab.ca and let us know. We'd love to hear from you and your ideas. So have a wonderful afternoon, and we hope to see you again next month.